This is lesson 39 in our study of the Old Testament history. We're studying history of the Hebrew nation. We're about to begin the study of the divided kingdom. We'll have a general survey today, all the way from 1 Kings chapter 13 through the book of Nehemiah. What I want us to do before we begin this study is go back and think a little bit about the conclusion of our last study. Solomon has married many women. As a matter of fact, has 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. Those women have turned his heart away from God so that he no longer serves God as once he did. And he's worshiping the idols that his wife worships. So in chapter 11 of 1 Kings, we read in verse 9, the Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he'd forbidden Solomon not to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's command. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you've not kept my commandments and my decrees which I commanded you, I will certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I'll not do it during your lifetime. I'll tear it out of the life of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but will give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. God made a covenant with David in 2 Samuel 7 that said one of his seed would sit on the throne as long as there was a kingdom. God keeps that covenant in spite of Solomon's sins and in spite of all of the sins of those around Solomon. He's going to give his kingdom, God says, to one of his subordinates. And in 1 Kings chapter 11, beginning with verse 26 and going through verse 40, we have that subordinate named. He's Jeroboam, who is one of Solomon's officials, an Ephraimite from Zeradah. God had said, or through Jacob in Genesis chapter 48, that Ephraim would be the superior tribe to Manasseh. And Jeroboam begins a reign in the north from the tribe of Ephraim. So significant is this man and this tribe that the whole nation of Israel, the northern nation that will form in our study today, will be called the nation of Ephraim. God appears by the prophet to Jeroboam and tells him, Ahijah the prophet, and tells him that he will get 10 tribes, and Solomon's son, Rehoboam, will only get one. Solomon heard about this and tried to kill Jeroboam, chapter 11, verse 40. But Jeroboam fled to Egypt to Shishak the king and stayed there until Solomon's death. Now that prepares us now for the study of the divided kingdom, because in chapter 12, Rehoboam will make an ill-advised move against the counsel of the older men, and 10 tribes will leave him, and they will never be united again until spiritually they're united in the kingdom of God, the church of Jesus Christ. Now on your outline, in lesson 39, there's a lot of geographical and historical information that we're going to look at in today's lesson. If you will, turn to that outline. If you don't have one, get one from your sponsor or write us, and we'll see you have an outline. It's very, very important in every lesson, extremely important in today's, because we're going to follow that outline so that we can get through with this study in the time allotted. Turn to your outline. The first point, division A, is the division or the division of Solomon's empire at the time of his death. We're talking about the geographical division. It had 5 geographical divisions when Solomon died, and it extended from one border of the promised land unto the other border of the promised land, from the river Euphrates to the river of Egypt. First of all, it was Syria. We've seen this on earlier maps. But Syria is all that territory north of the Jordan River all the way to the river Euphrates. Damascus is the capital city of this nation, or this territory of Syria. We'll study later, in 2 or 3 lessons from now, a very powerful ruler of Syria named Hazael, a dominant ruler of that country. And it continued as a unit until 750 BC, when it fell to Assyria, the general Sargon. The thing we need also to know about this territory, it is a very warring type country, and it developed steel to a large measure. Even today, Damascus steel is steel that's so strong that if you get gloves on, you can pull a sword all the way around to where the point touches the haft, and it will not break. It's a strong, powerful nation. Then to the south, just east of the Dead Sea, is the country of Moab. It's between the Arnon and the Zered River, controlled by Israel, the northern nation, whenever they have strong kings. But when they don't have strong kings, this nation becomes independent, or this area becomes independent and afflicts Israel so that they will know they're not doing the will of God. Due south of the Dead Sea is the territory of Edom. It was to Judah what Moab was to Israel. Edom, of course, descended from Esau, so it's a brother, as Moab descended from Lot, and therefore it's a kinsman. But Edom, as long as Judah is faithful to God, is subject to God. Anytime a king of Judah becomes unfaithful, then Edom becomes free, so that they have an invariable thermometer as to whether or not they're doing the will of God. Both nations do. If Moab is free, Israel is exceedingly wicked. If Edom is free, Judah is wicked. Now Israel, from the northern end of the Dead Sea north, is the 10 northern tribes. These will be ruled by nothing but wicked kings. There'll be only one king in all the line of Israel that calls on Jehovah at any time. The rest of them either worship, as we'll study today, golden calves set up by Jeroboam, the first king, to keep them from going to Jerusalem and worship God, or they'll worship along with Jeroboam's calves the Baal god that we'll see in a future lesson, or in our next lesson, that Ahab sets up. This nation continues with the capital first of all in Shechem, and then in Tirzah, and then in Samaria. This nation continues into 721 BC when it's carried off into captivity into Assyria. Now the nation of Judah to the south is two tribes, Benjamin and Judah. And they will have good kings and bad kings. Israel never has a good king. Only one time does any king call on the name of Jehovah, and he walked in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat. But this nation, Judah, will have nearly as many good kings as they do bad kings. They'll even have some great kings. They will last to 586 BC when they'll be conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and carried away into Babylon. That's our geography lesson. Now let's just survey the history that we're going to study for the next 7 or 8 lessons. First of all, there's a period that we'll call the period of division. That's from 935 BC at the death of Solomon until 842 BC when Jehu kills all of the sons of Ahab. On your outline, here's what we've listed and we'll briefly discuss today. Now I'm doing this so that as we study these things, you will be able to see that they fit in order and that they're not just scattered things. Notice first of all that there'll be the accession of Rehoboam to the throne and the breaking up of Solomon's empire. We'll study that in our next lesson. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, refused to listen to the wise advice of the elders about taxation, and rather than decreasing the taxation, increased it. And because of that, Jeroboam carried the northern 10 tribes away to form the nation of Israel, and they will never again be one nation. Jeroboam, second point, is the erection of Jeroboam's 2 golden calves. Jeroboam watched his people 2 or 3 times a year going down to Jerusalem to worship. He concluded, if I don't do something, they're going to kill me and make their loyalty again with Judah. So he put 2 golden calves, one up at Dan in the northernmost part of his kingdom, and one at Bethel in the southernmost part of his kingdom on the very road that leads to Jerusalem, and told them to worship those gods. And that thing drove Israel deeper into sin and further away from Judah. But we'll study that next time in detail. Next is the invasion of Judah by Shishak and the loss of all the treasures of David and Solomon. Remember in the last lesson we talked about all those tons of gold that came to Solomon? That just didn't go into Solomon's treasury. That went into the temple treasury. And Shishak, the king of Egypt, came and carried all those tons of gold into Egypt. So much so that they no longer had any golden shields in the temple. And so they put up brass shields. When the sun shines on brass, it looks like gold, but you get close and it's imitation. God is telling Judah, you're no longer my faithful people, but we'll study that later. The fourth point is the wars of Jeroboam with Judah. Matter of fact, for 5 or 6 kings, there is a constant warfare between Israel and Judah as God drives them again further apart because of their sin. And he wants Judah to know that he's going to be with them if they'll be faithful to him. He never tells Israel that he'll be with them, because with Jeroboam's golden calves, they decided to worship another god. But he has a war with these people to teach Judah that they should no longer consider Israel as their brother because they're worshiping other gods. Then in the 5th place, there's the invasion of Judah by the Ethiopians under Zerah, and the victory of Asa over Zerah. Now, God again is telling Judah by the covenant of blessing and cursing in Deuteronomy 28 that they're not doing as well because foreigners are coming and invading the land. And for 2 kings, they have victory over Judah. But then Asa, a good king, comes to the throne and he defeats the Egyptians. Then comes the introduction of Baal worship to Israel by Ahab and the appearance of Elijah. And we'll not have really the time I'd like to have when we get there to talk about Elijah, the great prophet of God. But he stood alone. There were 7,000 who did not bow the knee to the Baal worship, but he stood out. He stood against Ahab alone throughout all of Ahab's life and fought and in a way defeated the Baal gods again and again and again. It was a light thing, it seemed, for them to worship idolatry. The worship of Baal is a fertility rite. The worship is concluded by the act of fornication with a temple prostitute, either male or female. Then there's the wars with Syria at Aphek and the defeat of Ramoth Gilead in 1 Kings 20 through 22. They're being told again, Israel is, that I no longer count you as my people. You go out to war and you always lose. Then there's the invasion of Judah in the reign of Jehoshaphat by the alliance of Ammon, Moab, Edom, and Amalek, resulting in their slaughter. Jehoshaphat is a good king, and Jehoshaphat in the valley of Jehoshaphat slew an innumerable host, greatly outnumbered, as God again is saying a simple lesson. If you be with me, I'll be with you. Then there's an allied war. Notice we've said war, 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 war. There's an allied war then of Israel and Judah with Moab. This is a bad thing when Judah allies themselves with Israel and the Baal worship begins to invade the good nation of Judah. And finally, to tell Judah that they are not in favor with God, there's the revolt of Edom from Judah in the reign of Jeroboam in 2 Chronicles 21. Obadiah, the prophet, was probably written at this time as he talked about Edom's sin of not coming to the aid of Judah in the time of their invasion. That's the period of division from 935 to 842. Then you have the Syrian period where Syrian is afflicting Judah and making alliances with Israel from 842 to 779. At the same time, Hazael comes to the throne of Syria, Jehu to the throne of Israel, and Athaliah, a woman, we'll find out the daughter of the most wicked woman that ever lived, Jezebel. They all come to the throne in the same year. Wickedness rules the whole promised land during that period of time. Then there's the destruction of Baal worship totally and completely by Jehu. He didn't do that because he wanted to worship God. He did that because he wanted to stamp out the influence of Ahab. And Jehu, because Jehu, it says, we'll study this, continued to worship at the golden calves of Jeroboam. He was not seeking God. He was simply seeking to strengthen his empire. Then Hazael, the king of Syria, defeated all of the land east of the Jordan and annexed that to his empire. Athaliah, when she came to the throne, slaughtered all of the seed royal, all of her children and all of her grandchildren, except one boy, Joash, 1 year old, who one of the servants of Athaliah took and hid. Jehoiada, the high priest at that time, enabled Joash to be a faithful king as long as he was under the influence of the high priest. The high priest repaired the temple. Joash gets credit for it, but it was really Jehoiada, the high priest, who repairs the temple. At this time, Jonah and Joel make their prophecies, and we'll find out what those are as we study. I think it's important that we locate the prophets in their historical environment so we can understand what they're saying and why they're saying it. Israel became totally subject to Syria during this period of time. When Hazael came down and defeated the king of Israel, set a new king on the throne, and made an alliance with him, and Israel actually for a while was a vassal, a puppet kingdom under Hazael's rule of Syria. Hazael tried to take Judah and took Gath and the country of the Philistines on the coast, but he could not take Jerusalem or the central part because they remained faithful to God. That's the Syrian period. Then there's the period of restoration of Israel. Israel has sunk low. They are the vassal, the puppet kingdom of Syria. The restoration of Israel goes from 779 to 742 BC. Jeroboam II, not the one who built the golden calf. Jeroboam II brought Israel back to its place of supremacy. He conquered Syria. He conquered all of the nations all the way to the river Euphrates. During this period of time, Judah was made tributary because Syria had all but conquered God's people. But with the war of Jeroboam II and with the war of Uzziah, or Azariah as he's also called, Judah is brought back to glory. And Judah becomes again then the faithful, to some degree, people of God. Then in the fourth period, we're calling on the outline the fall of Israel. This goes from 742 to 721 BC. The dates are not all that important. They're just of interest to people that like history. Assyria begins its march across history. We'll study Assyria more later, but Assyria is the most cruel, crude empire that has ever stood on the face of the earth. We'll study it in our historical, as we study this point by point historically. This is just a summary. Menahem, one of the kings of Israel, was so wicked that Israel again became subject to a foreign nation. Not this time to Syria, but to Assyria, the most powerful, warlike kingdom of the day. In the reign of Pekah, who followed Menahem, a couple of kings, Naphtali and other northern tribes are taken captive by Tiglath-Pileser. In history, this is Tiglath-Pileser III. Easier name to remember, and biblically he's called Pul, P-U-L. This is the powerful warrior king of Assyria. In the reign of Hoshea, Samaria, the capital of Israel, the northern nation, falls to Sargon in 721 BC, and the northern tribes are taken captive, and they cease to exist as a nation. A remnant of these people will last through the Assyrian Empire, last through the Babylonian Empire, and with the fall of Babylon, they will come back with some of the remnant of Judah to rebuild the temple to be destroyed. The last period, historically, of the divided kingdom is the fall of Judah, and that's from 721 to 586 BC. A note here. Judah lasted 135 years after the destruction of Israel. But most of that time, they were a subject nation to Assyria or Babylon. They were not really free. Most of that time. Great kings will arise during this period of time. And for a few years, Judah will be free again. But then they'll go back under the heel, either of Assyria or Babylon. The thing that begins this period is the reforms of the great king, maybe the greatest king since David, Hezekiah. Hezekiah, in the seventh year of Hezekiah, the city of Samaria was captured. So he was immediately after the fall of Israel. He reformed the entire land and was delivered from the attack of Sennacherib, the most powerful Assyrian king, by the direct hand of God, who sent a destroying angel and killed 185,000 soldiers overnight. Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, was taken captive by the Assyrians. He was the most wicked king. It was his sin that caused God to say, that's it, there's no coming back. I will finally destroy this nation. He repented in Babylon, and God got him out of prison and brought him back to the land, and he tried to reform the land, but it's too late. His sin had already pushed them over the limit. The iniquity of Judah was full. 2 kings later came King Josiah, a powerful, godly man. And he brought again the worship of God to the city of Jerusalem. He brought again honor and integrity to the land and peace to the land, and then made a tragic mistake. He went up against God's will to fight against Pharaoh Necho at Megiddo, and he dies. And he gave Megiddo the name of where God's enemy falls. And when we get to the book of Revelation one of these days, and we hear of Armageddon, that means the valley or the hill of Megiddo, where God's enemy always is defeated. Babylon arises, and Nebuchadnezzar, the great king of Babylon, arises, and he begins the destruction of Judah. In 606 BC, he carried away 10,000 people, including many rulers. In 586 BC, with the rebellion of Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar came and destroyed the temple, burnt the city, and carried away all of Judah, but the women and the old men into captivity. 586 BC will be the finish, the end of the nation. From then on, there'll just be a remnant. Let's look at some elements that contributed to this. Some elements that contributed to the division in 931 BC. First of all, at Solomon's death, there was an impetuous young ruler in the south, Rehoboam, who will not listen to the wise and seasoned veterans, but instead listen to the people of his day, the young men. There is secondly a clever opponent and rabble-rouser named Jeroboam. Jeroboam not only wants the kingdom, he's been told by God he can have the kingdom. So he stirs trouble. So you got one guy that won't listen to wisdom, the second guy who's got a hidden agenda. He wants to be king. The third cause that contributes to this division is Solomon's excessive taxation. Now, taxes are of God because the government is to be supported by the people. Romans 13 even says that. But Solomon has excessively taxed the nation. A young ruler, a rabble-rouser, excessive taxation. Then there's jealousy between the tribes of the north and the tribes of the south. They've never really been united. They've only been loosely federated. They don't like each other. Up in the north, they're an industrial people. Down in the south, they're an agricultural people. And so they do not have common interest. And so there's another contributing factor. Then there's the difference in geographical situation. Israel is on the northern nation, is on the great highways. And so they know all about foreign affairs. They're internationally turned. The south, Judah, is secluded. And all they know about is their own individual needs and their agricultural pursuits. They're on the back roads. So they'd be looked upon by Israel as backwoodsmen, as ignorant bumpkins. And we'll see that in the book of Amos. And then the real cause of all was Solomon's apostasy. That's the real reason for the division of the kingdom, as we read in the beginning of this lesson. Now, we'll study next time in full, but I think it's good that we think for a moment in the concluding minutes of this lesson about this man, Jeroboam the first, Jeroboam the son of Nebat, the clever rabble-rouser, the official of Solomon's court, that is the ruler in the north. We already have said that he saw that if he was going to unite his people and keep them under him, he was going to have a different center of worship than they had. It's important, isn't it? Isn't it significant that he saw that if the people worshiped together, they'd stay together? If they went to Judah to worship, that's where they'd think their allegiance was. In the final analysis, what you count ultimate, your God, what I count ultimate, my God, will determine whether or not we can remain one and united. What was the result of Jeroboam's sin? There were fourfold results. Very quickly. We'll study this later. This is just introduction and survey. In the first place, the Levites in the north are driven south because they have nothing to do. He will appoint any tribe to serve in his temple but the tribe of Levi that God has commanded to serve. In the second place, after a while, the pious move south. And that strengthens Judah. If I am a religious person, if I am in love with God, I'm not going to stay up here and worship these calves. I'm going to take my family and move to Judah so I can worship the Lord God. That was an initial reaction, and it continued later. There are two other references to it. It's stated in 2 Chronicles 11. It's stated in 2 Chronicles 15. It's stated in 2 Chronicles 30. Jeroboam and his system is totally rejected. That's the third reason. And it led Israel into sin and destruction. 23 plus times we'll read. He walked in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, wherewith he made Israel to sin. In our next lesson, we will discuss Jeroboam and his sin in detail. See you then.